Hey everyone, I haven't come across this comparison before. There's a topic that I was really interested in while trying to purchase the Laurier Astra, which is how does it compare to the Laurier Falcon, both being a 36mm watch from Laurier. I own both now. I own both for a while, so I feel as though I could give some opinion. So here we go. Let's start with the most similar aspects of the two models, which is the case. Both watches share the same 36 millimeters in diameter, along with 11 millimeters in thickness. Of that 11 millimeters, 2 millimeters is the hexolite or acrylic crystals. They also feature the same sign crown, along with a very flat, solid case back, and both cases have drill lugs. As far as I could tell, they are utilizing the same case for both models. The only difference being that on the Astra, the bezel is highly polished to signal out that it's a dressier watch, while on the Falcon, it has a brush bezel to signal out that it's a more sportier model. But beyond that, it is a pretty much identical cases, and you can't go wrong with either. Now, as far as movement, there is also a slight difference between the models and the movement that is utilizing. Both are utilizing the Miyota 9 series movement, but with Astra using the more commonly used 9015 with the date functionality, while the Falcon utilizes the newer 90S5 that lacks the date functionality but has an open heart design. Now, that's not going to matter because it has a solid case back, but the 90S5 is also known for having a little bit better shock resistance as well. Beyond that, as far as the specification, it's pretty much identical for both of these watches, minus 10 to plus 30 seconds per day, 8 beats per second, and 42 hours of power reserve. The distinction that the Laurier kind of makes out on their website is that the 90S5 that the Falcon uses has a better hand to dial clearance, meaning that there is a higher clearance between the actual hands of the watch and the dial. Therefore, they are utilizing it for heavier application of lume on the Falcon. So let's start talking about the lume then. All right, so as far as lume, the lume application is different between the two models. Falcon utilizes the more traditional lume application of the lume being on the hour markers as well as the hands, whereas Astra has lume application on the actual hands, but instead of being on the hour markers, there is a circular ring that encompasses the hour markers on the dial that has application of lume. So in the dark, it has an inverse effect where the hour markers are dark, and the background in which the hour markers are encompassed in tends to be lit up. So it's a little bit of a novelty as far as the application of the lume on the Astra. As far as the comparison of the lume between the two, I would say there really is no difference as far as longevity, as far as brightness. For the Astra as well as the Falcon, they seem to be just as bright for each model and last just as long for each model. So there really is no difference. Now, as far as which model I prefer when it comes to the lume, I would say from a novelty perspective, Astra would be better, but from a practicality standpoint, as far as reading the watch, Falcon is way superior in my personal opinion, mainly because of the fact that it is the traditional application of lume that people are familiar with, and along with the large 3, 6, and 9 numeral markers kind of helping out in you reading the time, it's a breeze to kind of tell the time in the dark versus within the Astra, because everything is kind of inversed. My dumb brain needs a minute to kind of figure out exactly what time it is. So if I have to pick a preference, it would go with the Laurier Falcon. Now let's talk about the bracelet, which is obviously different from a visual perspective, but they do share some similarities. So the bracelet of each model tapers from 20 millimeters down to 16 millimeters. They both share the same mill clasp that has 3 micro adjustments. And on top of that, the curvature of the end links are the same for both models. So if you own both of these models, you will be able to interchange the bracelet without there being significant gap between the end links in the case. Therefore, it'll be a proper fit for each of the models, no matter which bracelet you decide to utilize. Now, as far as the differences between the model when it comes to the bracelet, Astra utilizes the flat beads of rice bracelet, which has a very unique and retro aesthetic, while the Falcon utilizes the traditional Laurier flat oyster style bracelet for it's a little bit of a sportier look. I would say between the two bracelet, if I have to pick a preference, while I visually like the flat beads of rice bracelet that Astra uses, you do feel a little bit of the texture of the beads of rice bracelet on your wrist versus the Falcon's traditional flat oyster style bracelet. It is buttery smooth and you feel nothing but the weight of the bracelet on your wrist. Therefore, if I have to pick out of the two which bracelet I would prefer, I would lean very, very slightly toward the Laurier Falcon bracelet with the traditional flat oyster style bracelet that is being utilized for the majority of the Laurier watches. So let's talk about the dial, since these are two different models serving two different needs. Astra being more of a dress watch, while the Falcon being more of a sports watch. It would be kind of ridiculous to call out all the differences, so I will just kind of focus on the general differences that I feel as though are important between the two models. As far as Astra is concerned, I love the fact that it has a very clean design with high polishing on the hour markers. It's not your traditional Submariner or Explorer homages. It is a talking point and an attention getter whenever I wear the watch. So I just love the overall aesthetics of the Astra. The Falcon, on the other hand, has more of a universally appealing design, obviously inspired by the Rolex Explorer. But what I really like about the Falcon is that it has its own design language on top. So it has that waffle pattern within the dial, along with the severely prominent arrow hands that the watch utilizes, provides its own distinct style. And I feel as though, even though it's not a carbon copy of the Explorer, because of the fact that it takes its inspiration from that model, to me, I feel like it's going to have a more sustainability as far as how long it's going to be surviving within my watch box. Now, there are two subtle differences between the two dials that you might expect to be exactly the same. So I would like to talk about those two differences. One is the actual call out of the Laurier logo as well as the brand name on top of the dial. It is much smaller on the Astra versus the Falcon. Astra being a dress watch, everything is a little bit more compact, more polished, versus within the Falcon, because of the large numeral 3, 6, and 9 hour markers. In order to complement the design, the actual call out of the Laurier brand as well as the logo is much larger on the Falcon versus the Astra. So just an observation. The other thing that's going to be really important is that while both are 36 millimeters in dimensions of the case, Falcon on my measurement shows just above 27 millimeter of dial visibility, while Astra consistently measured around 28.5 millimeters of dial visibility. Now combine that with the fact that Astra is utilizing a white dial, which tends to make the dial appear larger versus the dark black of the Falcon. When you actually visually look at these two watches, Astra tends to look about 2 millimeters or so larger of a watch than the Falcon. Therefore, if you have any apprehensions about getting a 36 millimeter watch because you feel as though it's going to be too small for your wrist, I would definitely go with the Astra over the Falcon if those were the two choices, mainly because the Astra wears a little bit bigger for a 36 millimeter versus the Falcon, which tends to wear a little bit smaller for a 36 millimeter because of the fact that less dial is being present along with the darker dial. To summarize, I would recommend Astra for people who are looking for a dress watch, for people who do not want the usual Submariner or Explorer inspired design, for people who want a watch that's going to be an attention grabber, for people who want a 36 millimeter watch but they have concerns that it's going to look too small on your wrist because Astra is going to wear a little bit larger for a 36 millimeter watch. I would recommend the Falcon, on the other hand, for people who want a more sportier watch, for people who want to have a watch with a universal design language that stood the test of time, like the Rolex Explorer, but have its own distinct flavor where it's not mistaken for the original, and for people who want a 36 millimeter watch because they want a watch with a small presence on their wrist. I would say that because the two models serve very different purposes, it's recommended to own both. But if I have to pick one, to recommend to you folks over the other. While I prefer the Astra for myself personally, I think for a majority of the people, Falcon would be the better choice. It has the Rolex Explorer inspired design language that has a mass appeal. It has a slightly newer and bit more shock resistant movement inside, and I believe that it is a true Gato watch, again excluding the acrylic crystal argument, versus the Astra, which I think is kind of limited to night out on the town or nighttime activities because of the dressier design. So anyway, that's it. If you like the video, like and subscribe and all that stuff, and I'll see you later. Peace.